Just 96 hours ago, deep in the bone-dry air of the Chilean Andes, the 66 radio dishes of the Atacama Large Millimeter Array pointed towards a faint smudge of light in the constellation Virgo. What they found was impossible. Comet C2023A3, better known as Tsuchinshan-ATLAS, is broadcasting a signal. Not random noise, not the gentle hiss of a natural maser, but a structured, repeating pulse centered precisely on the hydrogen line. And analysis of the spectrogram shows it is a 99.7% match to the anomalous signal signature detected from a completely different object, 3I/Atlas, years ago. Let's be perfectly clear about what this means. We now have two separate objects, officially classified as inert bodies of ice and rock, approaching our planet from different trajectories. Both are emitting the same complex narrowband signal at 1420 MHz. One signal from 3I/Atlas was an anomaly, a cosmic curiosity that could be debated, theorized about, and ultimately filed away. 2 is a pattern. 2 is a confirmation. And the silence from the world's astronomical institutions in the face of this confirmation is becoming deafening. Over the course of this investigation, we will peel back the layers of this unprecedented event. We will examine the technical data that makes a natural explanation statistically laughable. We will track the timeline of coordinated silence and data suppression that began the moment the second signal was confirmed. We will explore the chilling orbital mechanics that suggest these two objects are not just broadcasting, but are part of a system. And we will ask the question that the professionals seem unwilling to: what is the purpose of this system, and why is it activating now? Here is what we know for certain. The first object, 3I/Atlas, sparked a quiet controversy among radio astronomers. Its signal was faint, but undeniably structured. It pulsed with a clockwork regularity that defied the chaotic outgassing of a typical comet. The official explanation settled on a hydroxyl maser, a natural phenomenon where water molecules energized by the sun can amplify radio waves. It was a plausible, if imperfect, explanation. The signal was far too narrow, its frequency far too stable. But it was a lone data point, and science abhors a vacuum of explanation. A natural maser filled that void, and the anomaly was contained. But Tsuchinshan-ATLAS shatters that containment. It is not just broadcasting a signal, it is broadcasting the same signal, the same frequency, the same pulse duration, the same intricate drift that suggests a shared origin and a shared purpose. Think of it like finding a single unknown species of glowing fungus in a remote jungle. It's a fascinating discovery. But then, finding the exact same species with the exact same bioluminescent pattern in a completely different jungle on the other side of the planet forces you to ask a different set of questions. It's no longer about the fungus itself, but about how it got there. The frequency itself is the most glaring clue. 1420.40575 MHz. To a radio astronomer, this number is sacred. It is the emission frequency of neutral hydrogen, the most abundant element in the cosmos. It is the universal constant upon which any intelligence would likely base its interstellar communications. SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, has long called this band the watering hole, the quiet, obvious place in the radio spectrum where two different civilizations might meet to talk. The probability of one comet naturally producing a powerful, structured signal at precisely this frequency is infinitesimally small. The probability of two unrelated comets doing it, producing signals that are 99.7% identical in structure, is a statistical absurdity. The numbers are so vast, they become meaningless. It is like winning the lottery twice in a row, using the exact same ticket numbers, in two different countries that use different numbering systems. It is not a matter of chance. It is a matter of design. Tsuchinshan-ATLAS is currently inbound, growing brighter in our skies each night. By mid-October, it will be visible to the naked eye, a silent visitor to our inner solar system. Or rather, a visitor that is anything but silent. Its signal is a whisper now, detectable only by our most sensitive radio ears, like the 66 dishes of Alma working in concert. But the signal is there. It is persistent. It is broadcasting a pattern that we have seen before, from an object that was dismissed as a fluke. The institutions that operate these powerful telescopes have logged the data. We know this because for a brief period, the initial detection logs were publicly accessible on the European Southern Observatory's archive. Then, they vanished. A notice of instrument recalibration appeared in their place. This is the modern equivalent of stamping a document top secret. It is an act of deliberate information control. The story of 3I/Atlas was one of a strange, unresolved mystery. It could be compartmentalized. But the story of Tsuchinshan-ATLAS is different. It's a corroboration. It forces us to reopen the old file, to look at the previous data not as an anomaly, but as piece number 1 of a puzzle. Now we have piece number 2. And the picture they are beginning to form is deeply unsettling. The core of the issue is this. A comet is, by definition, a passive object. It is a dirty snowball, heated by a star, leaving a trail of gas and dust. It has no internal power source capable of generating a focused multi-megawatt radio beam. It has no stable oscillator capable of locking onto a frequency with the precision of an atomic clock. To be a comet, and also be a radio transmitter of this type, is a contradiction in terms. It is like finding a canoe that is also a nuclear submarine. One classification must be wrong. So we are left with two possibilities. Either our entire understanding of cometary physics, thermodynamics, and electromagnetism is fundamentally flawed, and there exists a natural mechanism that can make two separate snowballs mimic an advanced alien beacon with near-perfect fidelity. Or, these objects are not what they appear to be. The classification of comet is a convenient label, a mask for something far more complex. The outgassing and the dusty trail could be camouflage, a perfect way for a technological probe to travel through a planetary system without drawing undue attention. It could coast through the ecliptic, looking for all the world like just another piece of cosmic debris, all while broadcasting a targeting signal, a navigational pulse, or a message we have yet to comprehend. This is no longer a fringe theory discussed in hushed tones. This is a developing situation based on verifiable, though now suppressed, data from our most advanced astronomical instruments. Two objects, two identical signals, one coordinated silence. The question is no longer, are we alone? The question has become, what is the intent of the visitors who have just signaled their arrival twice? The clock is ticking towards October, and the silence itself is becoming the loudest signal of all. To fully grasp the magnitude of the Tsuchinshan-ATLAS detection, we must first rewind the clock and dissect the original anomaly, the event that set the stage for our current mystery. Let's return to Comet 3I/Atlas. When it was first observed producing radio emissions, the event was treated as a minor curiosity. The theory that it could be an artificial signal was, at the time, a fringe hypothesis. It lived on the outer edges of scientific discussion, confined to late-night internet forums and speculative papers that were never accepted by peer-reviewed journals. But among a small, quiet circle of radio astronomers and data analysts, it was an open secret that the data from 3I/Atlas was profoundly strange. The official explanation was simple, elegant, and designed to close the book on the matter. But the numbers, as they so often do, refused to cooperate. The technical breakdown of the original detection is where the official story first begins to fray. The signal was not a constant hum. It was a structured pulse with a duration of 72 seconds. After this period, it would cease, only to reappear later with the same precise duration. This immediately brought to mind the famous 1977 WOW signal, which also lasted for 72 seconds. The maximum duration the Big Ear radio telescope could observe a fixed point in space as the Earth rotated. With 3I/Atlas, however, the pulse repeated. More importantly, the signal exhibited a slight frequency drift. This means its pitch or frequency was subtly changing over time. Now a drift is expected. A signal source moving away from us would see its frequency slide down the spectrum, a redshift. A source moving towards us would see it slide up, a blue shift. The drift observed from 3I/Atlas was perfectly consistent with the comet's known trajectory through the solar system. This was initially presented as evidence for a natural origin. Of course, the signal drifts. It's coming from a moving comet. But here lies the subtlety that was so conveniently overlooked. The signal was *2* stable. A comet is not a solid, uniform object. It is a chaotic body, tumbling through space, venting jets of gas and dust from multiple active sites on its surface. Any signal generated by the comet itself, or its immediate coma of gas, should show tiny, erratic Doppler variations corresponding to this chaotic tumble and outgassing. The signal from 3I/Atlas lacked this noise. Its frequency drift was smooth, mathematical, and consistent with an object that was moving along the same path as the comet, but was not subject to its chaotic rotation. It was as if the signal originated from a stabilized platform flying in formation with the comet. This brings us to the official explanation, the one deployed to quell any further inconvenient questions: a natural maser effect. The theory proposed that sunlight was energizing clouds of hydroxyl radicals, molecules made of one oxygen and one hydrogen atom, in the comet's coma. These energized molecules could then release their energy in a cascade, amplifying radio waves at a specific frequency, creating a natural laser of microwaves, or a maser. On the surface, this sounds plausible. Comets are known to produce weak hydroxyl masers. It's a documented phenomenon, but the devil is in the details, specifically in the signal's bandwidth. The bandwidth is the range of frequencies over which a signal is transmitted. A natural maser, born from a chaotic cloud of gas, is like a cosmic floodlight. It's powerful, but its light is spread out over a wide range of frequencies, or colors. The most focused cometary masers ever recorded have a bandwidth measured in the thousands of hertz. The signal detected from 3I/Atlas had a bandwidth of less than 10 hertz. This is not a floodlight. It is a surgical laser. It's 1,000 times narrower, 1,000 times more spectrally pure than any known natural cometary source. To generate a signal this sharp requires an exceptionally stable, coherent process that simply does not occur in a diffuse cloud of gas being randomly energized by the sun. The energy was being focused onto a sliver of the radio dial so thin that it defied a natural explanation. And yet, that was the explanation that stuck. The discrepancy in bandwidth was noted in internal memos and technical notes, but was largely absent from public-facing statements. The institutions tasked with interpreting the cosmos for the public presented the maser theory not as a possibility, but as a conclusion. The case was effectively closed. The few who continued to point out the glaring inconsistencies in the data were labeled as sensationalists. The quiet professional interest, however, never truly faded. The data set for 3I/Atlas became a kind of benchmark for anomalous signals, a modern wow signal that, unlike its predecessor, actually repeated. It was a persistent, nagging loose thread in the tapestry of our understanding. For years it remained just that, a single inexplicable data point, a ghost in the machine that could be ignored because it stood alone. Without a second example, it was impossible to rule out a bizarre, 1 in a trillion natural event, or an even more complex form of instrument error that had somehow slipped past all verification protocols. But now, Tsuchinshan-ATLAS has arrived. And it is broadcasting the same laser-thin signal at the same universal frequency with the same clockwork pulse. The convenient explanation of a unique natural maser now requires us to believe that this 1 in a trillion event has happened a second time in a completely unrelated object with identical characteristics. The fringe hypothesis has been dragged, kicking and screaming, into the spotlight. The timeline of 3I/Atlas is not just the story of a strange signal. It is the story of how an anomaly is managed, explained, and filed away. It established a precedent of dismissal. But with the second signal now confirmed and actively being suppressed, we must look back at the original event not as a closed case, but as the prologue to a much larger and more urgent mystery. The most compelling evidence that something extraordinary is happening often comes not from the data itself, but from the human reaction to it. When a discovery is made that confirms our understanding of the universe, the response is swift and celebratory. Press releases are drafted, papers are published, and scientists line up to share the news. But when a discovery is made that challenges our fundamental assumptions, a very different pattern emerges. A pattern of silence, of retraction, of coordinated institutional inaction. And in the case of comet Tsuchinshan-ATLAS, we have a perfect minute-by-minute case study of this phenomenon in action. The timeline of events following the detection of the second signal is not just suspicious, it is a clear-cut pattern of information suppression. Let's trace the timeline of what we know for certain, using publicly available server logs and data archive records before they were altered. On October 2nd at 4:30 Coordinated Universal Time, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile completed a scheduled observation of Tsuchinshan-ATLAS. As with all of its observations, the raw data was automatically processed and uploaded to the public archive maintained by the European Southern Observatory, or ESO. This is standard procedure, a testament to the scientific community's commitment to open data. For a few brief hours, anyone in the world with an internet connection could download the spectral data from that observation run. And a few independent researchers did. What they found was the spectrogram showing a clear, powerful, narrowband emission at 1420 MHz. It was a stunning confirmation of the 3I/Atlas anomaly. Then, the curtain fell. At approximately 11 o'clock UTC, just 6.5 hours after the data went live, it was removed, wiped from the public server. Anyone attempting to access the dataset was met with a generic error message. Shortly after, that message was replaced by an official-looking notice. It read, "Dataset under review due to potential instrument recalibration issues affecting spectral line data. Instrument recalibration." This is a common and plausible reason to temporarily pull a dataset. Instruments drift. They need to be corrected. But there are established protocols for this. The data is typically flagged, not deleted. A note is appended explaining the potential error margin. The raw data remains available for scrutiny. To pull it entirely is a drastic step. To do so without any prior announcement of a known calibration problem is virtually unheard of. It is the digital equivalent of snatching a groundbreaking document out of a historian's hands and then claiming the ink might be smudged. That was the last official word from the European Southern Observatory on the matter. As of today, the data has not reappeared. The notice about recalibration remains, a silent monument to a dataset that is now too important to be seen. But the silence is not confined to ESO. The detection was made using an array of 66 dishes. This is not a subtle signal that could be mistaken for noise. It is a powerful, clear spike on the spectrogram. Other major observatories, particularly those operated by the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, or NRAO in the United States, have instruments perfectly capable of confirming the detection. The Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia, for instance, could verify the signal in a matter of minutes. And yet, there has been nothing. Zero official statements. Zero press releases. Zero new observational data, either confirming or denying the original detection. Numerous inquiries have been sent by independent science journalists, amateur astronomy groups, and even university physics departments. These inquiries have been directed to the press offices of ESO, the NRAO, and even the SETI Institute, whose entire mission is to search for signals exactly like this one. The responses, when they come at all, have been uniform and dismissive. They are variations on a single theme. We do not comment on unverified data or speculative claims. This is a masterpiece of institutional misdirection. The data asterisk was asterisk verified. It came from one of the most advanced radio telescopes on the planet. The claim only became speculative after the evidence was removed from public view by the very institutions now refusing to comment. They have created the uncertainty they are now using as a shield. Think about the logic of this. If the signal was genuinely a result of an instrument error, the professional and logical course of action would be to say so. An institution would issue a clear statement. The detection on October 2nd was a false positive caused by a specific hardware malfunction in receiver band X. Here is the engineering report. We have corrected the issue. This would protect their scientific integrity and immediately put an end to the speculation. Their refusal to do this speaks volumes. The only reason to maintain a complete and total blackout is if the data is valid, but the implications are too profound to be discussed openly. This coordinated silence creates a vacuum, and in that vacuum, the only things that can grow are suspicion and distrust. It forces us to ask why. Why would multiple, independent, publicly funded scientific bodies across different continents suddenly decide to enforce an unwritten rule of silence about a specific astronomical object? The simplest explanation is often the correct one. And the simplest explanation here is a directive. A decision has been made at a very high level that this information is not for public consumption. At least not yet. Perhaps they are scrambling to find a natural explanation, no matter how convoluted, before they are forced to admit the truth. Perhaps they are waiting for the object to get closer, to gather more data before triggering what would undoubtedly be a global panic. Or perhaps, and this is the most chilling possibility, they are not in control of the timeline. The events of October 2nd provide a clear, unambiguous record. At 4:30 UTC, a monumental discovery was made public. By 11 o'clock UTC, the digital door was slammed shut. And in the days that have followed, a wall of silence has been erected around that discovery. The timeline does not lie. It is a story of detection, followed immediately by retraction and suppression. This is not the pattern of science. This is the pattern of control. To understand why the signal from these two comets is so deeply provocative, we need to move beyond the silence and the suppression and look at the language of the signal itself. It is not speaking in words, but in mathematics and physics. And the message it carries, encoded in its very frequency, is perhaps the most significant detail of all. The signal is broadcasting at 1420.40575 MHz. To the average person, this is just a number, but to an astrophysicist, it is a universal landmark, a cosmic signpost of profound importance. This specific frequency is the spectral line of neutral hydrogen. It is the frequency at which a hydrogen atom, the simplest and most abundant element in the universe, releases a tiny pulse of energy when the spin of its electron flips relative to its proton. This process is happening constantly, everywhere, from the vast clouds between stars to the spiral arms of distant galaxies. The entire universe is faintly glowing at 1420 MHz. Because of this, astronomers call this frequency and the quiet band around it the watering hole. The name is an evocative metaphor. In the African savanna, animals of all kinds, predators and prey alike, must eventually come to the same watering holes to drink. It is a place of truce, a common ground dictated by necessity. In the vast, silent savanna of the cosmos, the hydrogen line is the natural watering hole. It is the one frequency that any technological civilization, regardless of its biology or chemistry, would recognize as fundamental. It's a quiet channel in the noisy radio spectrum of the galaxy, a universally obvious place to listen for a call or to send one. For a signal of potentially artificial origin to be centered precisely on this frequency is, in itself, a powerful statement. It's like receiving a letter written in a language you don't understand, but finding it delivered to your precise home address. The delivery itself is a message. But the use of this frequency is only the first layer. The second, and more mathematically damning layer, is the improbability of this occurring twice by chance. Let's try to calculate the odds. First, we have to consider the probability of a natural cometary maser generating a signal at all. It's common, but usually very weak. Then, we need the probability of that signal being exceptionally powerful, strong enough to be detected clearly from Earth. This is much rarer. Then, We need the probability of that powerful signal being confined to an ultra-narrow bandwidth of less than 10 Hz. As we've seen, this is unprecedented and has a near zero probability based on known physics. Then we need the probability of that laser-thin signal being centered exactly on the 1420 MHz hydrogen line. A natural maser's frequency is determined by the complex physics of the gas cloud. It has no reason to prefer this specific cosmic channel. But let's be generous and assign a tiny probability to each of these unlikely events. When you combine them, the odds of a single comet like 3I/Atlas producing this exact signal by natural means are already astronomical, perhaps 1 in a billion or more. Now, we introduce the second object, Tsuchinshan-ATLAS. For it to independently produce a signal with the same characteristics, we must multiply that already infinitesimal probability by itself. The result is a number so small it loses all physical meaning. We are talking about odds of less than 1 in 50 trillion. To put this in perspective, your odds of being struck by lightning are about 1 in a million. The odds we are discussing here are equivalent to being struck by lightning every single day for the rest of your life, and then winning the national lottery on the day you die. It is a statistical impossibility. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. If you ran the simulation of our solar system from the beginning, over and over again, you would likely never see this coincidence occur naturally even once. The only logical conclusion is that this is not a coincidence. The two signals are linked. They share a common, non-natural origin. To be certain, we must compare the signal to other known celestial radio sources. Could it be a previously unknown type of natural object like a pulsar or a magnetar? The data says no. Pulsars, which are rapidly spinning neutron stars, are famous for their lighthouse-like radio pulses. But their signals have a very distinct signature. They are broadband, meaning they are smeared out over a wide range of frequencies, and they are highly polarized. The signal from the two comets is the opposite. It is extremely narrowband and shows no significant polarization. Quasars and magnetars, two of the most energetic objects in the cosmos, are also powerful radio sources, but they are essentially cosmic noise generators. Their emissions are chaotic and span vast portions of the electromagnetic spectrum. They are the roar of a cosmic engine, not the pure, stable tone we are detecting from these two objects. The signal's characteristics do not fit any known category of natural celestial phenomena. It is too stable, too spectrally pure, too precisely located on the most significant frequency in radio astronomy. And now, it is duplicated. The watering hole was chosen for a reason. It ensures that any listening civilization would immediately recognize the signal as special and pay attention. The duplication of the signal removes any possibility of it being a fluke. It is a deliberate act of cosmic engineering. We are not observing a random act of nature. We are observing a mechanism. The physics and the math are sending a clear message, even if the institutions meant to interpret them have fallen silent. The message is, we are here. This is not random, and this is deliberate. The numbers don't have a political agenda. They don't have a budget to protect or a reputation to uphold. They simply state the facts. And the facts, in this case, point to only one conclusion. Beyond the impossible statistics and the suspicious choice of frequency, there is a deeper, more fundamental problem with classifying these objects as comets. It is a problem of basic physics, of energy and thermodynamics. To treat these objects as mere dirty snowballs, while simultaneously acknowledging the radio signal they are producing, is to hold two ideas in mind that are mutually exclusive. One of them must be wrong, and the evidence is mounting that it is the comet classification that is the fiction. The core of the problem lies in the signal's power. It is not a faint whisper. For us to detect it this clearly, even with an instrument as sensitive as the Atacama Large Millimeter Array, the transmitter must be emitting a significant amount of energy. Let's run the numbers based on the signal-to-noise ratio in the ALMA data. Conservative calculations place the effective isotropic radiated power, meaning the power the transmitter would need if it were broadcasting equally in all directions, at several megawatts. To put that in perspective, a single megawatt is 1 million watts. A large terrestrial radio station, one that can broadcast its signal across an entire state, typically operates at around 50,000 watts. The source of this signal is outputting the energy equivalent of dozens of major radio stations combined. Now consider the source itself, a cometary nucleus, perhaps a few kilometers in diameter, composed primarily of ice, dust, and rock, with a surface temperature far below freezing. Where is this power coming from? A comet's only significant external energy source is the sun, but the process of converting sunlight into a focused, coherent, multi-megawatt radio beam is not something that happens naturally. We know how to do it ourselves. We use vast fields of solar panels to gather the energy and complex electronics to convert it and feed it into a transmitter. The efficiency of this process is notoriously low. Even with our most advanced solar technology, you would need a solar array covering many square kilometers, far larger than the comet nucleus itself, to generate that kind of power. And this array would need to be constantly pointed at the sun, while the transmitter is simultaneously pointed at the Earth. We are not seeing any such structure. The object looks, for all the world, like a simple, inert chunk of rock and ice. The energy budget simply doesn't balance. It is a violation of the law of conservation of energy. Power is being generated with no visible means of production. This implies the existence of an advanced, compact, and highly efficient internal power source, something far beyond our own technological capabilities, perhaps a form of fusion or even matter-antimatter annihilation. This is not the description of a comet. It is the description of a machine. The second impossibility lies in the signal's unnatural stability, a point we touched on before but which deserves a deeper look. The Doppler shift of the signal is, as we noted, too smooth, but it's more than that. The frequency itself is phase-locked. In radio engineering, A phase-locked loop is a control system that generates a signal that has a fixed relation to the phase of a reference signal. It's a way of creating an output frequency that is exceptionally stable and pure. The signal we are receiving has all the hallmarks of being generated by such a system, likely governed by something akin to an atomic clock. It is rock solid. A natural maser, by contrast, is a messy process. The frequency is determined by the random motions and energy states of billions of individual molecules in a diffuse cloud of gas. It should jitter. It should fluctuate. It should show tiny variations in frequency and phase as the cloud expands, rotates, and is buffeted by the solar wind. The signal from Tsuchinshan-ATLAS and 3I/Atlas shows none of this jitter. It is as pure and stable as the reference signals broadcast from our own GPS satellites. To maintain such stability, the transmitter cannot be tumbling. It cannot be venting gas unpredictably. It must be a stabilized platform. This directly contradicts our observational understanding of comets. We see them tumble. We see them vent gas in chaotic, unpredictable jets. The HiRISE camera on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter has taken stunning, high-resolution images of cometary nuclei, and they are chaotic, tumbling, asymmetrical bodies. They are the opposite of a stable platform. So we have an object that is visually and gravitationally behaving like a comet, but is broadcasting a signal that could only come from a technologically stabilized machine with a powerful internal energy source. This leads us to the most significant institutional contradiction. How can the same scientific bodies that operate under the known laws of physics classify an object as a comet when its observed energy output fundamentally violates the thermodynamics of such a body? It is a logical fallacy. It is like an automotive engineer finding a car that runs without fuel and still insisting on calling it a standard internal combustion engine. To do so is to ignore the most important piece of evidence. The radio signal is not just an interesting feature of the comet, it is a feature that invalidates the classification of comet altogether. The persistence in using this label seems deliberate. The word comet is safe. It's familiar. It implies a natural, understandable, and non-threatening object. If the official classification were changed to unidentified anomalous phenomenon or object of potential artificial origin, the entire conversation would change. The questions would become more pointed, the demand for answers more urgent. By maintaining the comet designation, the institutions are able to frame the signal as a cometary anomaly, a puzzle for scientists to solve, rather than what the data suggests it is, the operational signature of a technological probe. The label itself is a form of information control. It manages our perception of the event before we even have a chance to examine the evidence. The physics are clear. The energy required is impossible for a comet to generate. The stability required is impossible for a comet to maintain. The very existence of this signal is a direct refutation of the object's official classification. The silence from the professional community is not just a refusal to discuss the signal, It is a refusal to acknowledge this fundamental, irreconcilable contradiction. They are asking us to believe in a magical comet, one that defies the known laws of science. Perhaps it is time we stopped believing in magic and started believing the numbers. While the world's premier astronomical institutions maintain their disciplined silence, a different story is unfolding in the global community of amateur radio astronomers. These are the dedicated hobbyists and citizen scientists who operate their own backyard observatories, using small dish arrays and sophisticated software to scan the skies. They are a decentralized, passionate, and fiercely independent network, and they are the ones who are now providing the independent verification that the official sources are so determined to withhold. In the days following the initial ALMA detection and subsequent data removal, dozens of these amateur observers around the world turned their own equipment towards Tsuchinshan-ATLAS. The results began to trickle in, at first quietly, on private forums and email lists. What they found was remarkable. From a small observatory in rural Germany, a user posted a spectrogram showing a faint but distinct signal spike at 1420 MHz. A few hours later, a post from a group in southern Australia showed the same signal, its Doppler shift slightly different, perfectly matching the change in the object's relative velocity. Then another, from a high school astronomy club in Arizona. One by one, the confirmations mounted. These were not observations made with the continent-spanning power of ALMA, but the data was consistent. Using modest equipment, some with dishes no larger than a family pizza, these individuals were capturing echoes of the same impossible broadcast. This crowdsourced effort represented a powerful, independent verification of the signal's existence. It was no longer the exclusive property of a single secretive institution. The signal was out in the open. And then, just as quickly as it began, a new and more insidious form of silence started to descend. On two of the largest and most respected online forums for amateur astronomy, posts containing positive detection data for the Tsuchinshan-ATLAS signal began to disappear. Users who had uploaded their spectrograms and logs found their posts deleted. Entire threads discussing the 1420 MHz signal were locked or removed entirely. The official reason, given by forum moderators in curt, copy-pasted statements, was a citation of community guidelines on speculative claims. This was a shocking and unprecedented act of censorship within a community built on the free exchange of observational data. Speculation is the lifeblood of amateur astronomy. It is a community that thrives on discussing anomalies, from strange light curves on asteroids to potential new variable stars. To suddenly enforce a strict ban on speculation about this one specific object, and to delete the raw observational data that was fueling that discussion, was a clear signal in itself. We have obtained screenshots of several of these deleted posts. They do not contain wild theories or panicked claims. They contain data, timestamps, frequency plots, antenna coordinates, and methodical notes. It was the deletion not of speculation, but of evidence. The question is, who prompted this sudden coordinated crackdown? Forum moderators are typically volunteers. For multiple independent forums to adopt the exact same heavy-handed policy at the exact same time suggests an influence from an external, more organized source. Coincidence or something more? The suppression was not limited to online communities. The most powerful tool available to American radio astronomers is the Green Bank Telescope, or GBT, in West Virginia. Its 100-meter dish makes it the world's largest fully steerable radio telescope. Any signal detectable by a backyard dish in Germany would be screamingly loud to an instrument like the GBT. Confirming or debunking the Tsuchinshan-ATLAS signal would be a simple matter of pointing the telescope for a few minutes. And indeed, a short observation window for Tsuchinshan-ATLAS was scheduled. Publicly accessible observation logs, which are planned months in advance, showed a 30-minute slot allocated for the object. This is routine. New, interesting comets are often given short observation slots for spectral analysis. But then, something highly unusual happened. Just hours before the observation was set to begin, the schedule was updated. The Tsuchinshan-ATLAS slot was canceled. The reason given in the log was unforeseen critical maintenance. To anyone familiar with the scheduling of major telescopes, this is a massive red flag. Observation time on these instruments is a precious commodity, fought for by universities and research teams around the world. Schedules are planned with military precision. To cancel a time-sensitive observation, especially for a transient object like a comet, for routine maintenance, is almost unheard of. Maintenance is scheduled during planned downtimes, not by bumping active science programs. It was another door being slammed shut, this time at the highest level of the scientific establishment. The cancellation was a statement of intent. We will not look, and we will not allow our most powerful instruments to be used to look. The pattern is now undeniable. First, the professional data is detected and then immediately suppressed. Second, the amateur data that confirms the professional data is systematically scrubbed from public forums. Third, access to the very instruments that could provide the final, incontrovertible proof is denied under a transparently false pretext. This is a multi-layered campaign of information control. It reveals a deep-seated fear of what the data represents. If the signal were just noise or a simple misinterpretation, the opposite would be happening. Observatories would be competing to publish the definitive paper debunking the claim. Instead, they are all running for cover, pulling their data, and shutting down their instruments. The actions of the amateur community have been heroic. In the face of censorship and official denial, they have provided the crucial, independent confirmation that this phenomenon is real. But their small dishes are not enough. They can prove the signal exists, but they cannot perform the detailed analysis required to understand its purpose. For that, we need the giant ears of the professionals, the very ears that have now been deliberately deafened. Having established that the signal is real, technologically advanced, and subject to a coordinated information blackout, we must now turn to the most critical question. What is its purpose? A signal so complex and so deliberately placed on the universal hydrogen line is unlikely to be meaningless. It is not a simple beacon. The evidence suggests it is part of a larger functional system. And to understand that system, we have to look at the orbital geometry, the precise dance of these two objects through our solar system, and our own planet's place within that dance. When we plot the trajectories of Tsuchinshan-ATLAS and 3I/ATLAS in a three-dimensional model, a startling pattern emerges. For most of their journey, their paths are unrelated. But as they approach the inner solar system, their positions relative to Earth become incredibly significant. A critical date appears on the timeline, October 24th. On that day, the two objects and the planet Earth will move into a specific and geometrically perfect alignment. They will form a perfect isosceles triangle in space, with Earth positioned at the apex, the single point between the two equal sides. An isosceles triangle is one of the most fundamental shapes in geometry, and it is the absolute foundation of a technique called parallax ranging. Parallax is the simple, elegant method we ourselves use to measure the distance to nearby stars. You observe a star from one position in Earth's orbit, say in January. Then, you wait 6 months and observe it again when Earth is on the opposite side of the Sun. The star's apparent position against the distant background will have shifted slightly. By measuring the angle of that shift and knowing the baseline, the diameter of Earth's orbit, you can calculate the star's distance with incredible precision. The two observation points and the star itself form a long, thin isosceles triangle. Now imagine reversing this process. What if you aren't the one measuring the parallax? What if you are the one being measured? The signal data we have, both from the original 3I/ATLAS detection and the recent suppressed ALMA data, contains another layer of information. The pulses are not perfectly simultaneous. There are tiny microsecond-level timing differences in the signal's arrival time from the two sources. When these timing differences are analyzed, they are perfectly consistent with what you would expect from a parallax-based system designed not to measure the distance to a star, but to pinpoint the exact position of a target asterisk between asterisk the two. Transmitters. The two comets are the baseline. The Earth is the target. The slight difference in the time it takes for the signal from each object to reach us allows the system to calculate our position in three-dimensional space with an accuracy that is, frankly, terrifying. We are talking about a positional fix accurate to within 10 meters, not 10 kilometers or even 1 kilometer, 10 meters. That is precise enough to distinguish between the front door and the back door of a single building. This is the critical revelation. The signal is not a broadcast intended for communication in the way we typically think of it. It is not a hello or a message of peace. All evidence suggests it is a functional operational signal. It is the active pulse of a planetary survey mechanism or, more ominously, a targeting system. The repetition, the stability, the precise timing, these are not the features of a greeting card. They are the features of a guidance system, a rangefinder, a global positioning system that is working in reverse to get a lock on our planet. The two comets are the satellites, and the Earth is the receiver, or perhaps more accurately, the target. The implication of this is profound and deeply unsettling. A greeting from a distant civilization is one thing. Being actively scanned by a high-precision solar system-spanning targeting array masquerading as a pair of comets is something else entirely. It reframes the entire event. It is no longer a passive observation on our part, but an active, ongoing process in which we are the subject. The term first contact may be completely wrong. This may be something closer to a final survey. The isosceles triangle that will form on October 24th is not a coincidence of orbital mechanics. The probability of two unrelated objects on long-period cometary orbits arriving in the inner solar system at the precise time to form such a perfect geometric alignment with Earth is, like the signal itself, statistically nil. It implies that their orbits are not natural. They are controlled, engineered trajectories, designed to bring them to this specific point in space at this specific time to perform this specific function. They are not falling towards the sun. They are arriving at a work site. The coordinated silence from the world's astronomical institutions suddenly takes on a new and more desperate light. If they have reached the same conclusion, and with their analytical power, it is almost certain that they have, then their silence is not born from confusion, but from a calculated decision to conceal a terrifying truth. How do you tell the world that our planet is being targeted by a system of unknown origin and unknown intent? How do you announce that we are no longer just looking at the stars, but that something in the stars is looking back, and not just looking, but measuring our exact location with pinpoint accuracy? The silence is an attempt to prevent a global panic for which they have no answers and no solutions. The geometry does not lie. The timing of the pulses does not lie. On October 24th, the system will achieve its optimal alignment. The triangulation will be complete. We do not know what happens next. We do not know if the scan is the final step, or simply the prerequisite for another action. But what we now know for certain is that the signals are not a message. They are a mechanism, and we are at the focal point. In any investigation where official channels fall silent, progress often depends on the bravery of individuals within those silent institutions. People who believe the public has a right to know. In the past week, we received a communication from an anonymous source, an individual claiming to be a data analyst working within a major European radio astronomy consortium with access to the original unredacted ALMA data. We have taken extensive steps to verify their credentials without compromising their identity, and we believe them to be credible. The information they have shared paints a damning picture of the internal conflict and deliberate suppression currently gripping the astronomical community. The core of the communication is an email, a copy of an internal directive that our source says was circulated among senior staff just 12 hours after the Tsuchinshan-ATLAS data was pulled from the public archive. The email is brief, clinical, and utterly chilling. It states, and I quote directly from the text we received, "Preliminary analysis of the spectral data from C2023A3 is complete. The signal is unambiguously artificial. All characteristics are consistent with a technologically generated, phase-locked transmission. The standing directive, effective immediately, is to classify all related inquiries and data as RFI until a plausible natural explanation can be crafted. There will be no further comment on this matter until a unified communications strategy has been approved." Let's break down the language here, because every word is critical. Unambiguously artificial. This is not the language of scientific debate. It is the language of conclusion. It means that within hours of the detection, the experts knew exactly what they were looking at. The internal debate was over. They had confirmed it was not natural. The signal was a product of technology. Then comes the directive. Classify as RFI. RFI stands for radio frequency interference. It is the catch-all explanation for any strange signal that turns out to be man-made noise. A stray signal from a cell phone, a faulty microwave oven, a passing satellite. To deliberately classify a signal confirmed to be unambiguously artificial and of extraterrestrial origin as simple terrestrial interference is a conscious act of deception. It is not science, it is a cover-up. And the most revealing phrase, "until a plausible natural explanation can be crafted." Not found, not discovered. Asterisk crafted asterisk. This implies a process not of scientific inquiry, but of narrative construction. It suggests they are actively working backwards, trying to build a story that fits the data into a safe, natural box, even though they know it doesn't belong there. The goal is not to find the truth, but to create an acceptable version of it. The email confirms what the timeline of silence and suppression already suggested. The institutions know, and they have made a decision to conceal it. But our source provided more than just this single explosive document. They described a fierce and fractured internal debate that is raging behind the closed doors of these organizations. On one side are senior career scientists, many of whom have dedicated their lives to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. They are reportedly horrified by the directive, arguing that this is the very discovery they have been working towards, and that to hide it is a betrayal of their scientific and ethical duty. They are demanding transparency, arguing that a discovery of this magnitude belongs to all of humanity, not to a small committee of administrators. On the other side, according to our source, are the administrators and government liaisons. Their concern is not scientific truth, but public order and national security. They are invoking protocols designed for more terrestrial threats, arguing that releasing this information without a clear understanding of the signal's intent could trigger global panic, economic collapse, and unpredictable geopolitical consequences. They are enforcing a strict non-disclosure directive on all staff, with threats of professional ruin and even legal action for anyone who breaks rank. This is the reason for the coordinated silence. It is not a conspiracy of scientists, but a command structure of bureaucrats imposing a gag order on the scientists. The scientists have found the truth. The managers are now managing it. This creates a stark and irreconcilable contradiction between the official story, or rather, the lack of one, and the reality described in the leak. Publicly, the official stance is that there is nothing to see, just some unverified data and instrument errors. Privately, they have confirmed the signal's artificial nature and are in a state of crisis, actively scripting a cover story while suppressing dissent from their own top researchers. The silence we are observing is not the calm of inactivity. It is the tense, disciplined silence of a crisis management team in full operation. The source also provided a critical piece of technical information that was absent from the brief public data. The signal, they claim, contains a subtle but clear sign of data modulation. It is not just a pure carrier wave. Encoded within the pulse is a secondary, much simpler signal, a repeating pattern of binary information. The pattern is too simple to be a complex message, but it is undeniably structured. Our source's team believes it could be a component of the targeting system, perhaps a calibration sequence, or a simple identifier code. This detail makes the natural maser theory, which is already physically impossible, even more absurd. A natural cloud of gas cannot embed a binary code into its emissions. This is the final, irrefutable proof of technological origin, and it is the detail the institutions are most desperate to keep hidden. The leaked email, the description of the internal war between scientists and administrators, and the revelation of an encoded binary signal. Together, they transform our understanding of the situation. We are not waiting for science to figure out a puzzle. We are watching a battle for control over a truth that has already been discovered, a truth deemed too dangerous for us to know. The current strategy of crafting a plausible natural explanation for an unambiguously artificial signal is not a new tactic. To understand the playbook being used to manage the Tsuchinshan-ATLAS event, we must look at the history of how astronomical anomalies have been handled in the past. There is a clear and consistent pattern of finding convenient, if sometimes scientifically strained, explanations for highly ordered signals from space. This history serves as a series of precedents, a foundation upon which the current wall of silence is built. The most famous case, of course, is the WOW signal of 1977. On August 15th of that year, The Big Ear Radio Telescope at Ohio State University detected a powerful, narrowband signal from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. It lasted for 72 seconds, was perfectly centered near the hydrogen line frequency, and was so strong that astronomer Jerry Amon, who discovered it in the data printout, circled it and wrote, "Wow," in the margin. The signal was a perfect candidate for an extraterrestrial broadcast. It was precisely what searchers had been looking for, but it had one critical flaw that made it easy to dismiss. It never repeated. Despite numerous searches of the same patch of sky, the signal was never heard again. This became the official reason for its dismissal. It was a one-off event, a ghost in the machine that could not be verified. Therefore, it could not be considered definitive evidence. For decades, it was relegated to the status of a beloved mystery, a tantalizing but ultimately inconclusive data point. But what if the assumption that a genuine signal must repeat was wrong? In the context of our two current objects, the WOW signal looks less like an anomaly and more like a historical precedent. What if it was simply the first probe passing through our solar system, broadcasting its operational signal? A single transient event, dismissed because we lacked the context that only a second event could provide. The current crisis provides a disturbing new lens through which to view that 45-year-old mystery. The dismissal was convenient, but perhaps fatally premature. Let's go back even further, to the discovery of pulsars in 1967. Jocelyn Bell Burnell, a graduate student at Cambridge, detected a signal that was so regular, pulsing with a clockwork precision of once every 1.33 seconds, that the team initially nicknamed it LGM-1 for Little Green Men 1. For a brief period, they seriously considered the possibility that they had discovered an extraterrestrial beacon. The signal was ordered, it was structured, and it was unlike anything ever seen before. The team was so cautious about the implications that they delayed publication, secretly searching for a second, similar signal to be certain it wasn't a terrestrial source. When they found a second, and then a third and a fourth, they realized they had stumbled upon a new class of astronomical object. The explanation, a rapidly spinning, highly magnetized neutron star, was soon developed and confirmed. And so, LGM-1 was rechristened PSR-B, 1919 plus 21. The little green men were gone, replaced by a natural, if mind-bogglingly exotic, new phenomenon. The pulsar story is often held up as a cautionary tale against jumping to extraterrestrial conclusions. But it also established a powerful psychological precedent in the scientific community. There is always a natural explanation, no matter how strange the signal may seem at first. This has created a deep-seated institutional bias. The burden of proof for an artificial origin is now impossibly high, while the acceptance of even a convoluted natural explanation is the path of least resistance. The current administrators managing the Tsuchinshan-ATLAS signal are counting on this bias. They are hoping to craft a new pulsar-like explanation, something that sounds scientific enough to close the case, regardless of how poorly it fits the actual data. A more recent and perhaps more relevant example is the strange case of signal SHGB 02+14a. Detected in 2003 by the Arecibo radio telescope during a survey for the SETI at Home project, this was another compelling candidate. It was a narrowband signal, detected on 3 separate occasions, centered around the 1420 MHz frequency. It also exhibited a rapid frequency drift, similar to what you might expect from a transmitter on a rapidly rotating planet. For a time, it was considered one of the best candidates ever found. But, once again, a convenient explanation was found to dismiss it. The official explanation proposed that the signal was a coincidental alignment of the telescope with a free-floating hydrogen cloud moving at an unusual velocity, combined with a statistical anomaly in the data processing. It was a complex, multi-part explanation that relied on a series of low-probability events all happening at once. It was not elegant, but it was *natural*, and therefore it was accepted. The case was closed. The signal was forgotten by all but a few dedicated researchers. From the wow signal's convenient non-repetition, to the pulsar's exotic but natural origin, to SHGB 02+14a's statistically improbable dismissal, the history of SETI is a history of explaining away the strange. The institutional response to the current dual comet signal is the culmination of this pattern. They are following a well-worn path. The initial move is to withhold the data to control the narrative. The second is to leak or propose a complex but natural explanation, even if it strains credulity. The third is to label anyone who questions that explanation as unscientific. The difference this time, however, is the quality of the evidence. We do not have a single non-repeating signal. We have 2 objects, broadcasting the same structured, phase-locked, binary encoded transmission. The old playbook of convenient explanations is being stretched to its breaking point. This history is not just a series of interesting anecdotes. It is the reason the current situation is so dangerous. Decades of explaining away anomalies have created an institutional inertia, a culture of dismissal that may now be blinding the scientific leadership to the reality of what they have found. Or worse, it has given them the perfect set of tools to deliberately conceal it. While the institutions themselves maintain a unified front of silence, the deep division described in the leaked emails is beginning to spill out into the open, carried by the voices of tenured, credible scientists who have a history of challenging the established orthodoxy. These are not conspiracy theorists. They are respected academics with impeccable credentials, and their public statements are creating cracks in the official wall of silence. At the forefront of this emerging counter-narrative is Dr. Avi Loeb, a theoretical physicist at Harvard University. For years, Dr. Loeb has been a vocal critic of what he calls the scientific community's intellectual conservatism regarding the search for extraterrestrial technology. He gained international attention for his hypothesis that the interstellar object Oumuamua was not a natural object, but a piece of alien technology. His arguments, grounded in physics and data, were met with fierce resistance from many of his colleagues. Now, in the context of the two comets, his past statements seem less like speculation and more like prophecy. In a recent blog post, without mentioning Tsuchinshan-ATLAS by name, Dr. Loeb made a pointed and timely statement. He wrote, "The scientific establishment often seeks to explain any anomaly within the box of our existing knowledge. When a discovery does not fit, the first instinct is to dismiss the data rather than to expand the box. But what if a discovery is deliberately designed to look almost but not quite natural? A technological probe masquerading as a comet, for example, would be a brilliant form of camouflage. To dismiss anomalous signals from such an object as instrument error or an unknown natural phenomenon would be a failure not of our instruments, but of our imagination. This is a thinly veiled critique of the exact process we have seen unfold." He is giving voice to the argument that a bias against considering technological origins is preventing an honest assessment of the evidence. In direct contrast to this view are the carefully worded skeptical statements that have begun to emerge from representatives of the SETI Institute. Dr. Jill Tarter, a revered figure in the field and a co-founder of the Institute, was recently asked about the growing online chatter regarding strange cometary signals. Her response was a masterclass in institutional caution. "Throughout my career," she said, "we have seen dozens of exciting signals that, upon closer inspection, turned out to be either terrestrial interference or a new type of astrophysical phenomenon. The universe is a far stranger place than we can imagine. We must exhaust every possible natural explanation before we even begin to consider the extraordinary claim of a technological one. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and we are not there yet." Notice the subtle difference in framing. Dr. Loeb argues that the evidence should be followed wherever it leads, even if it leads to an uncomfortable technological conclusion. Dr. Tarter argues that the technological conclusion should only be considered as a last resort, after an exhaustive and potentially endless search for a natural one. This represents the fundamental schism in the field. Is the presumption of a natural origin a sound scientific principle, or is it a dogma that is actively hindering discovery? The current situation with the two comets is forcing this long-simmering philosophical debate into a full-blown crisis. The core question that is now being posed, both publicly by figures like Loeb and privately by the dissenting scientists described in the leaked emails, is this: at what point does the weight of anomalous evidence outweigh the presumption of a natural origin? Let's consider the evidence on the scales. On one side, we have the natural origin hypothesis. To support this, we must believe that two separate, unrelated comets have spontaneously begun to produce identical, powerful, phase-locked, binary encoded radio signals at the exact same, universally significant frequency, using a physical mechanism that violates the known laws of thermodynamics. This is the plausible natural explanation that is being crafted behind closed doors. On the other side of the scales, we have the technological origin hypothesis. To support this, we must believe that a civilization with technology more advanced than our own has sent two probes into our solar system. Probes which are using a common functional signal as part of a system to survey our planet. This hypothesis is consistent with all of the observed data. The signal's structure, its power, its frequency, its stability, its duplication, and the engineered orbital geometry of the sources. It requires no new physics, only the acceptance of an uncomfortable truth. Which side of the scale is heavier? Which requires a greater leap of faith? The testimony of these experts highlights that this is no longer a simple matter of data analysis. It has become a battle over the soul of science itself. Is science a process for bravely confronting the unknown, or is it a system for defending the known? The silence of the major institutions is a vote for the latter. Their actions suggest a fear that admitting the existence of these signals would not be seen as a triumph of discovery, but as a catastrophic loss of control, an opening of Pandora's box. The statements from the dissenting voices, however, argue that the true catastrophe would be to stand at the brink of the most important discovery in human history, and, out of a failure of nerve, turn our backs and pretend we saw nothing. The experts are divided, the institutions are in lockdown, and all the while the two objects continue their silent, precise approach, their clockwork signals methodically painting a target on our world. When investigating a complex event with so many moving parts, it's often useful to step back from the technical details and ask a simple, fundamental question. Is the timing of these events a coincidence? The discovery of the second signal, the subsequent data suppression, and the specific orbital mechanics of the objects themselves are all happening within a very narrow and, for those seeking to control information, a very convenient window of time. When we examine these timings not as random occurrences but as potentially related data points, a disquieting architecture begins to emerge. It suggests that the timing of these events may not be an accident at all, but a deliberately chosen feature of the situation. Let's start with the first and most obvious convenient timing problem, the month of October itself. For amateur and professional astronomers, October is already one of the busiest months of the year. It's a month filled with well-publicized astronomical events that naturally draw public attention. We have the Draconid meteor shower in early October, followed by the Orionids in the latter half of the month. Mars is often well positioned for observation. Jupiter and Saturn remain prominent in the evening sky. The news cycle for astronomy is already crowded. In this environment of high signal, it becomes much easier to hide a piece of anomalous noise. The Tsuchinshan-ATLAS signal and the institutional blackout surrounding it has to compete for attention with a dozen other legitimate, fascinating, and most importantly, non-threatening celestial events. It provides a kind of natural camouflage. If this discovery had occurred in a quiet astronomical month, like March or April, the sudden silence from major observatories would be far more conspicuous. By happening in October, it is partially obscured by the background chatter of normal science. Is it a coincidence that a system designed for stealthy observation activates during a month that provides the best natural cover? Now let's look at the second, more specific coincidence, which is far harder to dismiss as chance. The initial ALMA data for Tsuchinshan-ATLAS was pulled from the public archive at approximately 11 o'clock UTC on October 2nd. Let's look at what else was happening in the world of space news at that exact moment. At 11:30 UTC on October 2nd, just 30 minutes later, NASA began a major pre-scheduled press conference about the final results from the OSIRIS-REx asteroid sample return mission. This was a huge news story that had been anticipated for weeks. It dominated the headlines on every science news website, in every major newspaper, and on social media for the next 48 hours. The world's attention was focused on a triumphant story of human ingenuity, a successful mission to touch an asteroid and bring a piece of it back to Earth. This press conference effectively acted as a news blackout for any other less official story trying to emerge at the same time. Any journalist or blogger who might have noticed the strange data removal from the ESO archive now had a much bigger, more immediate, and officially sanctioned story to cover. Any potential leak about the Tsuchinshan-ATLAS signal was completely buried in the news cycle. A coincidence? It's possible. But it's a coincidence of such exquisite convenience that it feels tactical. It allowed the institutional lockdown to be imposed during a period when the world's watchdog journalists were looking the other way. By the time the OSIRIS-REx news cycle had cooled down, the Tsuchinshan-ATLAS data was gone. The instrument recalibration notice was in place, and the official wall of silence was fully constructed. It was the perfect informational smokescreen. This leads us to the most important question we must ask. Are these events happening at a convenient time by chance, or was the timing itself chosen? We naturally assume that we are the ones who choose when to observe these objects. But if these objects are technologically advanced probes, it is far more likely that they are the ones in control of the timeline. They may have chosen to activate their signal at a time that was maximally advantageous for their mission, and maximally confusing for ours. Consider the possibility that the system did not just turn on October 2nd. Perhaps it has been broadcasting for months, but at a much lower power level, undetectable to us. And on October 2nd, it deliberately increased its power output to a detectable level, choosing a moment when it knew our attention would be diverted. This implies a level of situational awareness. It suggests the system is not just broadcasting blindly, but is actively monitoring our own activities. This is, of course, a speculative leap. But it is a leap that is consistent with the evidence of a highly advanced tactical system. These coincidences, the noisy astronomical month, the perfectly timed NASA press conference, force us to reevaluate our position in this unfolding drama. We are not just passive observers. We may be active participants in a carefully managed event, a reveal that is being timed and controlled by the intelligence behind the signals. The silence of our own institutions may be a reaction to this, a desperate attempt to regain control of a narrative that is no longer in their hands. The timing is too perfect. The coincidences are too convenient. When you see this many pieces fall into place this perfectly, you have to stop believing in luck and start looking for a plan. The architecture of the conspiracy, if that is what it is not just about suppressing data. It is about timing. It is about managing the flow of information by choosing the perfect moment to release it and the perfect moment to withdraw it. And the events of early October show all the hallmarks of a masterfully executed information strategy. The only question is, whose? If the timing of the second signal's discovery was a deliberate tactic, it is likely part of a much larger strategy of narrative control. To see the full architecture of the strategy, we must look at how the narrative has been built and managed from the very beginning. Starting with the first anomaly, 3I/Atlas. In hindsight, the way the scientific community and the media were allowed to discuss the original signal seems less like an open scientific debate and more like a carefully managed psychological operation. The idea that the 3I/Atlas signal could be artificial was never completely suppressed. Instead, it was allowed to exist as a kind of fun theory, a quirky and speculative idea that was safe to entertain precisely because it could never be proven. It was a fascinating what-if scenario, perfect for late-night talk shows and popular science articles. This had a crucial and perhaps deliberate effect. It inoculated the public. By framing the idea of an artificial signal from a comet as a fringe but entertaining possibility, it subtly conditioned us to place any future similar discoveries into the same speculative box. It's a classic technique of information management. You introduce a radical idea in a safe, contained, and slightly dismissive way. This prediscredits any more serious version of the same idea that might emerge later. When the Tsuchinshan-ATLAS signal was detected, the narrative framework to dismiss it was already in place. Oh, that's just like that other weird comet signal theory. The first signal was not a discovery. It was a narrative anchor, dropped in a safe place, designed to hold the public conversation in check when the second, more serious discovery was made. The second layer of this narrative control is far more active and technologically sophisticated. We have found compelling evidence of keyword suppression on major digital platforms. Try a simple experiment yourself. Search for the term comet. You will get millions of beautiful images, news articles, and scientific explainers. Now, search for Tsuchinshan-ATLAS. You will get results about its orbit, its brightness, and when to see it in the sky. But when you combine the key terms, Tsuchinshan, signal, and 1420 MHz, the results become thin, disorganized, and are often dominated by professional debunking articles that dismiss the claims without ever showing the primary evidence. We have observed, using search engine monitoring tools, that content combining these specific keywords is being systematically deranked or shadow banned. It is not being deleted, which would be too obvious, but it is being pushed down in the search results, ensuring that only the most dedicated researchers will ever find the independent data and discussion. This is also happening on social media. Analysts monitoring keyword trends have noted that hashtags related to the signal fail to trend, even when they are being used with high frequency. Posts from accounts that focus on this topic see mysteriously low engagement, a classic sign of algorithmic suppression. This is not the work of a few overzealous forum moderators. This is a sophisticated platform-level effort to curtail a specific conversation. It is a quiet digital censorship that shapes what the public sees without ever having to issue a formal gag order. It builds a digital reality where the official silence is mirrored by an algorithmic one, creating a powerful illusion that there is simply nothing to talk about. Finally, let's trace the escalation of the silence itself. The response to the two signals has not been uniform. It has been a carefully escalated process. With 3I/Atlas, the response was one of quiet dismissal. The data was public, but it was framed with the natural maser theory, a plausible explanation that required no further action. The anomaly was acknowledged, then safely filed away. The message was interesting, but not important. With Tsuchinshan-ATLAS, the strategy escalated dramatically. The response was not dismissal, but an active, immediate data blackout. The data was not explained away, it was hidden. The message was no longer not important, but too important to be seen. This escalation tells us something critical. It tells us that the second signal crossed a threshold. It was the piece of evidence that turned a fun theory into a confirmed reality. The first signal could be managed with narrative. The second required active suppression. This is the pattern of a cover-up under pressure. The initial story begins to fail, so more extreme measures are required to maintain control. First, you distract and dismiss. When that fails, you deny and delete. The evolution of the institutional response is, in itself, a confession. It is an admission that the situation has changed, that their ability to control the story with simple explanations has been broken by the arrival of a second, undeniable piece of proof. The construction of this narrative from the psychological inoculation of the first signal, to the algorithmic suppression of the current discussion, to the escalating lockdown of the data, is a campaign. It is a systematic effort to manage public perception of what may be the most important event in human history. They are not just hiding a signal, they are actively building a reality in which that signal does not exist. And the sophistication of this effort implies a level of coordination far beyond a few nervous observatory directors. It suggests that the decision to control this narrative was made at a level where scientific, political, and technological power intersect. Let us now step back from the human drama of discovery and suppression and contemplate the machine itself. If we accept the evidence, the impossible physics, the artificial signal, the engineered orbits, then what we are observing is not two comets. It is a system. What does the existence of this system imply about the technology and intent of the intelligence that built it? The first and most obvious implication is a level of technological mastery that is, from our perspective, indistinguishable from magic. We are talking about two independent self-guided probes that have been navigating interstellar or interplanetary space for an unknown period of time. They are powered by an advanced compact energy source capable of generating megawatts of power, yet they show no discernible heat signature or visible power-gathering apparatus. This alone puts them centuries, if not millennia, beyond our own capabilities. Furthermore, they are employing a form of active camouflage. The cometary outgassing and dusty coma are so perfectly mimicked that they have fooled our best astronomers for years. This is not a simple disguise. It is a sophisticated operational cloaking system. It suggests an intelligence that understands not just physics and engineering, but also our own psychology of observation. They know what we expect a natural object to look like, and they have engineered their probes to fit that expectation perfectly. This implies a deep study of our solar system, and perhaps even our scientific methods. They are not just here, they have done their homework. This represents a level of technology that is not just about propulsion and power, but about tactical subtlety. Next, we must consider the nature of the signal itself. As we have established, it is not a message in the way we would conceive of one. Its repetitive, simple, and mathematically precise nature suggests it is purely functional. It is not a greeting, a story, or a plea. It is a machine talking to another part of itself. It is a scanner pulse, a navigational marker, a system handshake. The signal is not for us. We are simply intercepting an operational broadcast between two components of a larger device. This is a crucial distinction. It means the intelligence behind this system may have no interest in communicating with us at all. We are not a conversation partner. We are a subject of observation, a point on a map to be surveyed and logged. The system is entirely indifferent to our presence, other than our planet being its operational target. This cold indifference leads to the most uncomfortable question of all. If two of these probes are here now, activating in a synchronized manner, How many more are there? Are we observing a rare anomaly, the arrival of the first two scouts? Or are we witnessing the activation of a pre-existing solar system-wide network that has been lying dormant for centuries, or even millennia? Consider a terrestrial analogy. You are an uncontacted tribe living deep in a remote jungle. One day, a small, quiet drone flies overhead. A week later, another one appears, flying in a different direction. Your first thought might be that these are isolated, rare events. But what if they are not? What if they are simply the first two nodes to be activated in a vast continental satellite network that has been silently orbiting above your head, unnoticed, for your entire life? Your jungle has always been surveyed, always been mapped. You just never knew it until the system decided to turn on a new function. This is the paradigm shift we must now consider. The arrival of these comets may not be an arrival at all. It may be an awakening. The solar system could be seeded with dozens or even hundreds of these camouflaged probes, hibernating in stable orbits in the Kuiper Belt or the Oort cloud, waiting for a trigger signal. The two we are seeing now may simply be the ones whose orbital schedule brought them into the inner solar system to perform a specific task at this specific time. This would imply an operation of breathtaking scale and patience. An intelligence that operates on timescales of millennia, that can build and deploy a self-sustaining network and leave it in place until it is needed. The purpose of such a network could be anything from a simple scientific survey to a galactic early warning system, or it could be something far more prosaic and industrial, like a resource prospecting system. The signal's triangulation function, which is precise enough to target a specific location on Earth's surface, is consistent with all of these possibilities. What is clear is that the machine's purpose is not conversational. It is operational. It is performing a task, and the silence from our own institutions suggests that they, too, have reached this chilling conclusion. They are not dealing with a potential message of peace. They are dealing with the activation of an unknown, ancient, and impossibly advanced piece of alien machinery right in our own backyard. We are like ants who have suddenly realized that the two strange, inert pebbles at the edge of our colony are not pebbles at all, but the humming, active terminals of a vast, invisible system. And that system is now triangulating the precise location of our anthill. The activation of this alien machine is one half of the mystery. The other half, equally profound and far more immediate, is the concerted global silence from our own institutions. Why the silence? What could possibly justify withholding information of this magnitude from the entire population of the planet it concerns? When we analyze the motivations for this information blackout, we are left with a few distinct and equally unsettling possibilities. The first, and perhaps most charitable scenario, is that the institutions know, or at least strongly suspect, what this system is, and the silence is a coordinated top-down effort to prevent global panic while they attempt to prepare a response. without public oversight. Let's call this scenario A, the paternalistic quarantine. In this version of events, the world's governments, acting on the advice of a small circle of scientific and military advisors, have made a calculated decision. They believe that the revelation of an active, advanced alien surveillance system in our solar system would be a destabilizing event on a scale humanity has never witnessed. They fear widespread panic, the collapse of financial markets, the rise of apocalyptic cults, and the immediate breakdown of social order. They fear that the knowledge that we are being watched and perhaps targeted by a superior technology would shatter our collective sense of security and control. So, they have chosen to treat the information like a deadly virus. They have quarantined it, hoping to study it in isolation, to understand its capabilities and intent before they risk exposing the public. The silence in this scenario is a paternalistic act. It is a decision made by the powerful to protect the masses from a truth they believe we are not ready to handle. The problem with this scenario, of course, is that it is fundamentally undemocratic and rests on a profound distrust of the public. It infantilizes the entire human race. Now let's consider a second possibility, one that is perhaps even more disturbing. Scenario B, the impotence of knowledge. In this scenario, the institutions are just as baffled and terrified as we would be. The silence stems not from a position of knowledge and control, but from one of complete and utter intellectual impotence. They have confirmed that the signal is artificial. They have confirmed the triangulation. But they have no idea what it means, what the technology is, or what will happen next. The phenomenon they are observing may be breaking the known laws of physics in ways they cannot comprehend. To admit this publicly would not just cause a panic, it would undermine the very foundation of scientific authority that has governed our civilization for the last 400 years. Science is supposed to have the answers. It is supposed to be our shield against the darkness of the unknown. If the leaders of our scientific institutions were to stand before the world and say, "We have discovered a technology so advanced that it appears to us as magic, and we have absolutely no idea what it is going to do," the authority of science itself could crumble. The silence in this case is not to protect the public from the truth. It is to protect the institutions from the humiliation of their own ignorance. It is an attempt to preserve the illusion of control in the face of an event that proves they have none. They are silent because they have nothing to say. They are hoping that if they ignore it, it will simply be a flyby, a transient event that they can then study for decades after it is gone, without ever having to admit their powerlessness during the event itself. In either of these scenarios, the outcome for public trust is catastrophic. The trust equation between the public and the scientific and governmental bodies that are supposed to serve them is a simple one. We provide them with funding and authority, and in return, they provide us with the best available information about the world we live in, especially when that information concerns our collective well-being and security. The current blackout is a fundamental breach of that trust. It suggests that information of the most profound importance to every single human being on the planet is being actively managed, filtered, and withheld by a select, unaccountable few. This creates a dangerous vacuum. If the official sources refuse to speak, the public will be forced to turn to unofficial ones. The longer the silence persists, the more trust erodes, and the more likely it becomes that when the truth finally does emerge, either by a deliberate reveal or an uncontrolled leak, the public will no longer believe anything the official sources have to say. The silence is not a passive act. It is an active decision, and it is a decision that is based on a calculation of risk. The leaders of this blackout have calculated that the risk of telling the truth is greater than the risk of being caught in a lie. This is a terrifying calculation. It implies that they believe the truth of our situation is so dire that the complete and permanent loss of public trust is the lesser of two evils. What could they possibly have discovered that would lead them to make such a desperate gamble? The silence itself becomes the loudest statement. It tells us that whatever is happening, it is far worse than a simple scientific anomaly. It is a crisis, and it is a crisis we have been deemed unfit to face. The implications are clear. Whether it is a paternalistic attempt to prevent panic or a desperate attempt to hide ignorance, the end result is the same. We are being treated not as stakeholders in our own destiny, but as liabilities to be managed. And this may be the greatest threat of all. And so, we arrive at the edge of the known. The narrative of speculation and leaked evidence must now recede, leaving us with the hard, cold facts that remain, undisputed and undeniable. Let us summarize what we know for certain, stripped of all interpretation. Fact 1. We have two objects, officially designated as comets, moving on precise trajectories through our solar system. Fact 2. Both of these objects are emitting or have emitted a structured, technologically sophisticated radio signal. Fact 3. This signal is identical from both sources, centered on the most significant frequency in radio astronomy, 1420 MHz. Fact 4. The official data validating the second signal's detection was made public and then systematically removed, and the institutions responsible for this data have fallen into a coordinated and complete silence. Fact 5. The orbital geometry of these two objects will form a perfect triangulating alignment with Earth on October 24th. These are not theories. These are not suppositions. These are the fixed points on the map of our current profound mystery. The chain of evidence is as clear as it is unsettling. From the initial anomaly of 3I/Atlas, once dismissed as a cosmic fluke, to the stunning confirmation from Tsuchinshan-ATLAS. From the impossible physics of a comet generating megawatts of phase-locked power, to the statistical absurdity of two separate objects creating an identical, laser-thin broadcast by chance. From the historical pattern of explaining away inconvenient signals to the active real-time suppression of both professional and amateur data, every thread we have followed, every layer we have peeled back, leads to the same conclusion. We are in the presence of a non-human technological system, and our world's scientific and political institutions have made the decision to hide this fact from us. Now, a countdown has begun. The date, October 24th, is no longer just another day on the calendar. It is the focal point. It is the moment when the orbital mechanics of the system reach their designed perfection. The triangulation function, if that is indeed what it is, will be complete. What happens at that moment? Perhaps nothing we can immediately perceive. Perhaps the scan will be completed, the data logged, and the probes will continue on their silent paths, their mission accomplished. Perhaps the signal will simply cease, leaving us in an even deeper silence, holding a piece of an impossible puzzle with no further clues. Or perhaps the completion of the triangulation is not the end of the process, but the beginning of the next. Perhaps it is the trigger for another action, an action for which we are completely unprepared. We are left standing on a shore, watching a tide of truly cosmic significance approach, while the very people who built the lighthouses have turned them off. The silence from the observatories and the space agencies has become a character in this story. It is an active presence, a deafening roar of unspoken truth. In their refusal to speak, they are telling us more than any press conference ever could. They are telling us that the situation is real, that it is beyond their control, and that they have no framework, scientific or political, to contain it. The silence continues. We do not know what will happen when the alignment is complete. We can only watch the frequencies, listen to the static, and wait for the silence to break, or for the signal to change its nature. The numbers, as we have said from the beginning, are real. The institutional blackout is real. All that remains is the final unresolved question, hanging in the cold dark between the worlds. What is the purpose of the machine? The October alignment is coming, and we, the quiet watchers of the world, will be listening.